my name is Kathy, and in today's video we're going to be canning up some ground beef. Now, things you could use the ground beef for are, throwing it in spaghetti or putting it in lasagna or tacos. It makes prep time so easy and quick. And, another advantage of having canned ground beef on your shelf is that it doesn't take up freezer space. You can take advantage of meat sales because, you don't have to be able to fit it in your freezer. And if there's a power outage, you don't have to worry about it spoiling. Now, I started canning ground beef and other meats about 8 years ago. And the reason was because I didn't have a very big freezer. So this was a way for me to take advantage of those sales and be able to, have meat available when I needed it. So let's get started. Okay, let's get these onions added. Now, I cut up 2 good-sized onions, just yellow onions. And in this 6-quart Dutch oven, I have almost 10 pounds of ground beef. It's 90-10, so it's not a full lean, but it's also not a real fatty cut. So what I want to do is get this cooked up, and I'm going to be cooking it. I'm not going to be cooking it until it's all the way cooked. So my hamburger will still have some pink left in it. I'm going to cook it a little bit more than what it is right now, but you don't want to can uncooked hamburger because it'll be too dense in the jar. And so you do want it to be cooked, but you don't want it cooked so much that the canning process is going to overcook it. So we do still want it to be just a little pink. At this point, I just want to get these onions cooked a little bit to soften them up. And I am going to add a little bit of salt and pepper. This is a pretty big pan full, so it may look like a lot, but it really isn't going to end up being that much. I don't add much more than just the onions and the salt and pepper. Because like I was saying, I want to be able to put this into multiple different dishes. And salt and pepper is pretty much what I would add anyways in any of those dishes that I would put this in. So I'm okay with adding those spices. And then the onion will give it a nice flavor as well. And then that way when I do open the jar to use, that's one less thing I have to do because I know that there's already onion included in the hamburger, so it'll save me time there too. Okay. That's looking really good. Still a little bit, some pink that I want to get out of there. Can you see that? There's a little bit of pink in it. But it's not completely cooked. So I think this is going to be perfect. So the next step would be to get my canner ready and my jars ready so that I can get this canned up. I actually don't have time to can it today, and that's the beauty about canning things like this. You don't have to do it all in one day. So if you're busy, like I am, I do work a full-time job, and I have a house to maintain, and I don't always have time to do all of the food prep and the canning all in the same day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer this meat into a bowl, and discarding as much of the liquid as I can, because I don't necessarily want that. That's mostly fat. And then I will put that in the refrigerator, and then tomorrow when I have more time, I'll go ahead and bring it out of the refrigerator, heat it back up, and get it into jars. So I'll bring you back when I'm ready to can it up. Okay, well, it's the next day. I put the meat in the refrigerator overnight, and I've brought it out now. I have my canner ready. My canner is ready with hot water. The water's hot. I've warmed up the meat. I have a pan of hot water to add to the meat. My jars are all in the oven getting warm. I have my jar lids and rings. I have a little bowl of white vinegar to wipe the rims with. I have my ladle for the water. I have my jar lifter, my debubbler, and a scooper for the meat. So let's get started and get this hamburger canned up. I'm going to scoop in the hamburger. I need to leave an inch headspace. Get this down in there. And an inch headspace, if you don't know, it'll be about right there to that bottom ring on the jar, on your mason jar. So next I'm going to fill it with hot water, again up to that inch headspace. Make sure I debubble it, because we don't want any bubbles down in the middle of the meat. We want to make sure we have the right amount of liquid in there. That looks about right. Now I'll debubble it. I'll check my headspace. With these measures, the bottom down here, that's 1 inch, and that goes right to the top of the liquid and the food, so we're right on our headspace. Since I am canning meat, I'm going to use vinegar to wipe the rims, so I'm just going to go around with a good wipe. I'm going to take one of my flats and a ring. Since we are pressure canning, we do not need to have our flats pre-warmed. I'm just going to make this finger tight, and then I'm going to put this right into the warm water. So everything I have here is about the same temperature. The water in my canner, the water that I'm putting in my jars, and the food that I'm putting in my jars. That way we don't have any temperature shock, because that can cause the jars to break if we have that. So we'll get another one filled up here. Now the canner I'm using today is a Presto 23 quart canner. it would hold 20 pint jars. I don't think I'm going to be using that many today. When I run out of meat, I'm sure I'll have more room in my canner. If I have enough jars warmed up, then I'll find something else that maybe needs to get canned up. Yeah, we'll get debubble it. I don't know if you can see that. That one had quite a few bubbles down in the meat. I'm just going to run along the side and in the middle, just making sure we don't have any air bubbles in there. So if you don't have your headspace correct, it can cause siphoning, and we don't want that, because that can cause a jar failure or lid failure. Okay, check it again. Headspace is correct. Wipe the rim. Put on a flap. And the ring. Oh, come on, get lined up there. There we go. Finger tight. And into the canner. Okay, well, you don't need to sit here and watch me do all of this. I'll go ahead and don't know what that was. I'll go ahead and get the rest of these jarred up and in the canner, and I'll bring you back when we're ready for the next step. Okay, so I was able to get 10 pint-size jars filled with the hamburger meat. I had some leftover pork roast that I cooked up earlier this week, and that was in the refrigerator, so I needed to do something with that. So I decided to go ahead and add that to the canner. In the pork roast, instead of filling the jars with water, I grabbed a jar of ham stock that I made earlier this year, and I went ahead and used that in the jars instead of the water. And even in the beef, in the ground beef, you don't have to use water. You can use beef stock if you have it. I didn't have enough on the shelf to use it, so that's why I'm using the water. And I don't usually use the liquid in the hamburger. When I use the ground hamburger like this, I'll usually drain off the liquid, so I didn't want to, there's no point in wasting beef stock for that. So anyways, now all of my jars are in my canner. I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on. And I'm going to turn up the heat on my gas, my stove, so that this can come up to temperature. Once this starts to steam, let me turn it this way for you. Once steam is steadily coming out of the little port here, I will let it vent for 10 minutes. That way it gets all of the air out of the pressure canner. And then I will put on my weighted gauge. Now on this particular canner, it is a dial gauge canner, and it came with a weight. This is not a weight gauge. It's just like a flat weight that would bring it up to temperature in here, and I would use the dial gauge with that one. But I find that it's easier to use the weighted gauge, and so with the weighted gauge, I will not be using the dial gauge as my measurement for when I'm at the proper pressure to start my canning timing. So for my altitude, I need to use 15 pounds of a weight gauge or 13 pounds on the dial gauge. So I'll be doing 15 pounds on the weight gauge today. And since these are pints, I'll process them for 75 minutes. So For now, we'll go ahead and this needs to come up to temperature and start steaming. So once this is ready and we're ready to put our weight on, I'll bring you back so you can follow along for the whole process. Okay, the canner has vented for 10 full minutes. As you can see, we have a nice stream of steam going. My little pressure pop-up was already popped up. Things are looking good. I'm going to go ahead and just put on my weight. And then as this comes up to pressure, when it's up to the 15 pounds, I should have showed you this. If I have, there's two weights on here. If I took off this top weight, it would be 10 pounds. With both weights on, it's 15 pounds. So I'm just going to leave that alone. Once it starts to jiggle, it'll be at its 15 pound. And then I will start my timer, and I'm going to process this for 75 minutes. So I'll bring you back once we're all done. Okay, so our timer went off. So they processed for a full 75 minutes. I turned off the heat. I let it come down to pressure naturally. Once it was all the way down to pressure, back down to zero, I took off the weight. Waited about 3 to 5 minutes. Then I took off my lid. I waited another 10 minutes, and now I'm ready to pull the jars out of the canner. Okay, and there we have it. I have 10 pint-sized jars of the ground beef. I have 2 jars of pork and 1 jar of some extra ham broth that I had opened, I didn't need, so I recanned it. If you liked today's video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. And make sure you hit the bell icon to get notified each time I put out a new video. Have an amazing day, and we'll see you on the next video.